Questions? Yes.
So you said that the devices that it appeals to, that you came up with those, like that you would describe those to.
I did not come up with those. No. What I meant to say was that they've not been formally established. It's not that anywhere we've said the church has assigned those or somebody within the church has assigned them. No, we've had priests that have said the same thing. I believe Ripperger himself has spoken on them. We've had Orthodox priests say the same thing. We've had those that have come from Eastern practices, myself included, notice it. So again, like any truth, it's already present. And so it's like noticing gravity. You're noticing the patterns that are there. But no, there's not been any formal, this is a 1-to-1 ratio. It's because, I mean, for example, I would argue that all 7 chakras deal with pride. It's just that you find it come to a culmination, finally killed in the 7th chakra.
Why I ask because is the first one, the base chakra, and appealing to those fighting, I think this is greed, avarice. The act of Deva Ganesh, chopping off the means of intellect and means of speaking, sounded to me a lot like what Aquinas says the effects of lust are, that it dulls the senses and dulls the ability to think.
Yes, and that would be one argument one would have back as well, is the Deva helping them to restore those senses as well? But on the other hand, is it the Deva also helping get rid of those things? Is it fostering the killing of speech and thought as well? That's what I've noticed, is that you come in the Deva or the chakra for one purpose and you come out the Deva for another. You're told that it's to help have control over these things, and instead you find yourself struggling with them even more. So.
One thing I was curious about is, or fascinating to me, is so the compare and contrast in the postures. In the Catholic Church, you had the image of obviously sitting, standing, kneeling, and then just kind of juxtaposing that with all of the postures you have shown for the various 7 stages.
Mm-hmm.
And just thinking about what they communicate, I think of kneeling as a posture that communicates fealty or a humility or something to that effect. And then I kind of, those Hindu postures, I wonder do you know if they were assigned, do they come about historically arbitrarily, like the cat versus the cow? Like, why do you think they even came up with those postures? What's the significance?
I came up with those postures in general. How did this posture get assigned to this Deva, or how did that evolve?
Yeah, that's
well, you can see them kind of eminent in some of the chakras. Well, let me touch on 2 things. First of all, with the Deva Nataraja, there actually is an asana that is very similar to that pose. And I only listed about 1 asana, and forgive me for the lack of this one. It seems to have disappeared. Gotta love Google Slides. But that pose that Nataraja is striking, there's 6, 7, 15 asanas to each Deva, to each chakra. So I've only listed some of the most popular ones because I was hoping a few yoga instructors would drift over, but apparently not so much. I'm sad. I was hoping for a little ruffle there. Anyway, but the point being is these are the ones I'm showing are the most popular. Like, they're the top ones. So the top 1 to 2. But there is one for this chakra that directly is Nataraja's pose. So yes, you see with these Devas poses that these Devas have struck that then become some of the asanas. And then some of the asanas that don't outright look like the poses that the Deva is striking are developments of that pose over time. So you realize that we don't just have the cat pose or the cow pose. We have the cat-cow pose, all right? Merges in between. So we would say that these poses are different poses or asanas that people have struck in yoga over time, because in their divination they feel that it has attuned that chakra, and then they label it just like we might label the constellations, or we might label patterns in theology or philosophy. So it's more of a classification system than it is like, oh, we've established this pose.
Yeah, so like there's variations, like you're saying, for every pose. And what we're seeing in the Western world is you get into a class and you're like, oh, well, if you can't do this level of it, let me show you the level of this pose that you can do. So there's like at least 3 variations in a class for beginner, intermediate, advanced yogis in that class. And then the question directly about cat-cow, that's a Western name for it, cat-cow.
Right.
But directly what cat-cow is doing, it's all in the spine. And if you get a teacher that is whoosh, like way in tune with what that position is doing, the way they teach it is start at the base of your spine and move that spine, then feel it, move the next one, let the next one go. So the way that started and why they're together is you're moving the spine, you're keeping it in alignment, and if you get stuck at one, they're like, oh, well, clearly that's your heart chakra. You need to work on that. It almost becomes like a therapy session. Like, let's work this out, through your spine. So it might be called cat-cow here is my point, but it's very much
It's kind of a spectrum.
It's a spectrum. It's
totally,
from a teaching standpoint, it's brilliant. It's scaffolding, just like anybody does. Again, like many different stratagem, they're not inherently good or evil. They're neutral. As we say, propaganda is not evil. It's how propaganda is used. So similarly, one of the best teaching methods is always scaffolding. So we have the Baltimore number 1, 2, and 3 for instruction, the catechisms. You start with the number 1 for those who can just get initiated, but you hope they get to the number 3 or eventually the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You have different reading levels from kindergarten through 12th grade. So some of these poses are not unique, different poses. They're not different in type, they're different in degree, so as to help you achieve it quicker, so that they can make sure that they still keep you and that you're still practicing these, and so you stay in the yogic practices. I like to say what's interesting too with what you said about the humility of it. I was saying this last Wednesday before the Marian Catechist group, was I can't help but notice, especially as a school teacher who's had to go through an endless amount of child youth protection training, that there is a predator component to this, and it starts with the very first asana, which is the root lock pose. The root lock pose is this one right here. All right, it's making sure that right here the root chakra at the bottom is locked. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. You're stabilized at the beginning before you focus on meditating. So it's encouraged you to shut everything and everyone out before you get started, like a predator. Then, as you're going along with the practices of the chakras and you move further and further up the spine, what are you doing? But you're surrendering your base functions, your desires, you're detaching from everybody else around you. Pretty soon it's just you and Brahman that you're supposed to be talking with. So like a predator, they've cut you off. They convinced you that they're all you need, and that you're supposed to surrender more and more of your functions to them. If in saying this, even with the recording, if this were in the public school system, the private school system, I would call that a sexual predator. That would be a teacher that I would report to the school system at that moment. It's isolation. Then it's what's the word I'm looking for?
Grooming.
Was that
Grooming?
Grooming. You're grooming. The whole notion of chakras is grooming. And one could argue, isn't that the same with Christianity? Renounce all of your things and follow me, be baptized. But the answer is no, because you never lose yourself within Christianity. You become more fully yourself. Also, Christianity is much more honest about its end goal at the beginning than it is. It's so much to our detriment right now that we've lose so many followers now each year.
It's pretty harrowing when you did the comparison, the parallel between, I guess, sexual predation
right.
and progressing through the chakras.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, by the end, it's not just control of you. It's so total control of you that you don't have control of you, that if the universe, by some sense, has a control over all the components in it, it has control over your individual parts, but you're not even whole enough to have control over yourself. So you don't even own you in the end. I mean, at least the sinner in hell is still a sinner in hell. At least they still have their identity in hell, even if it's separated from God and it's not the fullness of their identity. So in a strange sense, God is merciful in the sense that he lets the sinner keep themselves in hell, even if they suffer the punishments of hell. Hinduism does not afford the individual, even the individual.
So, another difference between the postures I notice is like the directionality. Like whenever you're kneeling, you're facing something, compared to a lot of these positions where it's about centeredness, it's about only you can really conceive of it all as one package, as opposed to standing, facing something, kneeling, where looking at that, you're like, well, what is this person facing? What is the other half of this?
Well, and Thomas Jefferson faced that. And again, the beauty of its age, its supposed age being one of the oldest religions in the world, is that even when it's not explicitly referenced, it's implicitly referenced. There are Hindu notions to the Enlightenment and to the Reformation as well. And aspects of it creep into the individual self and narcissism. Humanism, the focus on humans being all that there is, has its relationships to Hinduism, just like Protestantism itself has its relations to Islam. Even when they're not explicitly related, in their essence they are. And so you see Thomas Jefferson bemoaned this in his time, that when he needed to know something, he went out and read a book about it. He went out and found people that were knowledgeable on it. What did he do? He had to go out of himself to something else, as you're saying, to find it. But he bemoaned in his time that already you were having people say, well, I have my own self-knowledge. If I sit here and think about it long enough, I'll figure it out. I have my own interior knowledge. So you had traces of Hindu influence within early America even then. You had, I just need to seek my own self-knowledge. All that I need, I possess within me.
That's what they say all the time. And the bowing down, that's such a good point you make, Garrett, about the postures, because the bowing is always to themselves, and it's to what they teach. It's, you are divine, and we are all divine, so bow to the divinity within you, and I greet that light within you. It's, you know.
And again, as I touched on earlier, the pro-life notions as well. It's not coincidental that the New Age Western culture is also so just catastrophically pro-death and pro-abortion, because if the divine spark is there in Hindu or non-Hindu, and from the beginning that we're sparked to our very end, of which there is none, just simply dissolution, then what wrong is there? What moral evil is there in terminating the life? Not, again, that I am saying any formal sense of Hinduism condones that, but that those philosophies that are present within Hinduism are destructive towards the Westerner in that way, because it tells them there are no consequences, the divine spark is touched no matter what. All this is an exercise in self-improvement, but there is no floor. That's the number one reason it appeals to the Westerner. There is no sin, so therefore you can stay rooted, pun intended, within your conceit.
Well, the dangerous part that I knew and appealed to me is the namaste, when the light within you breeds the light within me. To me, the light within me was always Jesus Christ, and so I had a name for it. They don't put Jesus to that name, but they'll say, okay, well, you can call it that, you know? And so the dangerous part now in this world, with people you know, with people you walk with or friends with, family members, is that they're being drawn in by saying, sure, you can call it your God, call it whatever you want, but it's still, my light is the same as your light, and that's what I'm greeting, you know? And so they're drawing these people in like that, and then you go to the next thing where you're like, not so sure about that. Like the sinless thing, I was never on board with. I'm like, I'm not sure about that. But I can ascribe to this and take this on, and that's okay, because I'm okay within myself still with that, you know.
And that's where that personal truth, my truth, your truth comes in. That's directly from Hinduism, by the way.
We're seeing so much of that.
There's tons of documentation and books, volumes on how that relativistic sense of my truth, your truth. It's directly from that chakra, the fifth or sixth chakra. Well, and as you said too, they even tried to mix Christianity with Hinduism and suggest that the seventh chakra, Nataraja, is Christ, that Christ is the dancer of creation. And they mistake something that myself and others have said in the past, that Christ is the rhythm of the universe. Tolkien kind of alludes to that in the Silmarillion. If you're familiar with that at the beginning, that's a beautiful book, though. Like, if you're like, I just want to dive into something epic that I'm not going to understand at first and just chew on it, like, don't forget about mysticism and Hinduism. Just read the Silmarillion. But it's a beautiful allegory at the beginning of the Silmarillion about the fall of Lucifer. But of course, in this case, it's Tolkien nerd. Help me, I'm forgetting it. Morgoth. All right. And so all of the angels are playing a great song, and he breaks the harmony. And then Christ is supposed to come in later in the form, split in different forms. And of course, we have the three forms of Christ with Frodo, Gandalf, and Sam later on. But he's supposed to be the rhythm. So Christ is supposed to bring rhythm back to the universe in that sense. But because we say that, because we say Christ harmonizes by God taking on human flesh, becoming man, and what is assumed is redeemed, as I'm sure Carolina's tired of hearing me say, is assumed as redeemed, he harmonizes it, is not the same thing. They say because he harmonizes, oh, he must be the dancer. So that's a very prevalent thought right now, is to associate Christ with Nataraja, the seventh chakra. And oh, hey, it's the last one before you meet God. So, hey, this is... You're Nataraja? They both have a J in there? I've heard that one, actually. Like, they're like, he's the great dancer. And you see that even present, and I say this in dangerous territory right now, with Novus Ordo churches, you see a lot of images of Christ as dancing across the church or in stained glass window. I'm going to get in trouble. And so you see, or like the Lord of the Dance, or you see the wood cuttings of it, or you see even some stations of the cross borderline blasphemous, because that was an imposition, an attempt to merge Hindu and Christian notions. If we can make the visual image between Christ and Nataraja more evident, people will just see it and will see that all religions are the same.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, Zach. It occurs to me this is a big spiritual, battle point for all of us to take a stand on. That this is just another way of saying, oh, well, it's, Christianity, Judeo-Christian thought, it's just Hinduism, it's just Zoroastrianism, it's all the same story repeated throughout history, and it's all really just mythical legend to basically feed the postmodernist argument that religion's just the opiate of the masses, and it's all the same story.
You want to find the number one offensive thing to say to someone like that is not intended offensively, because I thought this was rather peacemaking, but apparently not so much, is, oh, we have all these stories, they're all similar. Well, first of all, they're similar, they're not the same. All right? But my answer would be, oh, it's not that they're all the same or similar so that you can pick which one. It's that all of them have been echoed throughout eternity, because they're all supposed to be leading to the one true love story, which is Jesus Christ. Pope Benedict talked about this in his books. We have the pagan cultures that came before Christ were to prepare the world for Christ. When we have the religions that still practice their religions and they have emanations and variations of Christianity, it's so that their soul can be primed to receive the faith. It's not so that they can choose it instead. And this is my favorite scene within Scripture. It's St. Paul at the Areopagus. St. Paul, when he came in and said, oh, those 17 gods you have and this one empty pedestal you have to the unknown God, that's God. Like, he meant to make a connection at the time, a means of connection. That did not mean he was condoning the 17 other gods. He said these were all rough drafts to get you there. So Nataraja at the very best is an emanation, is a precursor, is a shadowing, is an echo, is a yearning of the human heart for Jesus Christ, but it is not synonymous with Jesus Christ.
I came across something. when I was going through my annual advanced individual training, the knothead that was in my room was kind of like into Hinduism. He left the books with me, and I just threw them off to the side for a while. And I remember reading them, and it had to deal with Krishna, but they made it sound like, okay, Krishna has come to the world 3 times, and his parents were the same 2 people 3 times, and it was like they were trying to make Krishna as just being Christ. And that's one of the things I noticed about Hinduism, was that it tends to change to whatever
it is. That's why even if I had written this presentation halfway sloppy, it would have still been correct, because it would depend upon which cultural variation of Hinduism you have.
And it's your truth.
Yeah, it's in my truth. There we go. This is my Hindu truth. All right. I'm going to try to put this on YouTube, and they're going to block me for hate speech. So the thing I would touch on too with the Namaste, Carolina, is I actually dealt with that with my Catholic school. I had a nun-named teacher that was, as an exercise, wanting to have them do different greetings and use Namaste. And I said, well, you can't use that. And of course, the Crusader Deus Vult accusations immediately came out, but which for some reason they think is an insult, but I mean, I think is awesome. But they confuse the image and the likeness of God with the divine spark. They think that it's the same thing. C.S. Lewis does a wonderful job of making this clear with the delineation of Zoe versus Bios. And Father Hardin, with his Marian Catechist course, would make this clear. Cardinal Burke makes this clear as well. C.S. Lewis says that we have bios, we have natural life. The body naturally dies, and the soul could live forever, but it doesn't because of its sin, and in the sense of death of hell, not that the soul ceases to exist. But that it has no divine spark in it. So if you're not baptized, you have 0 divine spark in you. You are made in the image of God, but you do not have his likeness. You do not have his Zoe. And so baptism brings the Zoe. And this is from the Greek, Zoe, meaning life force, the God life force, is brought into you. And now because you have the life of God in you, you have his likeness back. And now you are in the image and likeness of him. So what the Hindus are trying to say is the likeness of God greets the likeness of God in you. But no, we don't have it if we have not been properly baptized. But 2, as Father Hardin would say, the soul is naturally immortal, but the body is not. The body would have always perished even before the fall. That's theological. That's an established truth. So which is it with Hinduism? Is it just the soul that has the divine spark and not the body? Because keep in mind, this isn't just about shedding the body. That would be Gnosticism. That would be thinking that the flesh is evil. That's a Protestant heresy. All right, but they don't say that the body is not a divine spark within Hinduism. They try to say all of it is the divine spark.
So how would you handle the practice of yoga in the Catholic school? But it's not really it's not yoga. It's not like the yoga that this is saying there. They want to separate that. In the churches, in the Catholic churches, you'll see they have yoga classes. In the Catholic schools, you'll see they have yoga, but we don't practice yoga. We just do some of the, But here you're saying it cannot be separated. How would a teenager, you get, how do you dissociate?
And the teachers are teaching mindfulness and meditation.
Yeah.
This is a problem even within public school from a non-spiritual perspective. They want to keep on slapping more policies on teachers, more apps on teachers, more loads on teachers to try to govern the teachers. You can't out-policy the teachers. If the policymaker is up here and the individual is down here, unless the policymaker is living day by day with the individual, they can't change them even then. That would make them an individual, not a policymaker. Fire the teachers and hire good teachers that you can trust. You vet, I dare say that, vet Catholic school teachers before you hire them. Have them make oaths to the magisterium, oaths not against the modern world, oaths against modernism. you make sure that you put people in those positions that we can trust. This is also what makes us different from Hinduism. Truth is a person. Truth is not a concept. Truth is Jesus Christ. So the solution is people you can trust, not systems you can trust. So you can't fix the Catholic school system or the public school system that's doing that. You've got to replace the people. However, if you're going to find a compromise to strike in the meantime, write letters, suggest policies of it that's going to have to be micro-movement processes, be ones that they can trust. Again, PHI, Soul Core, the ones that have baptized yogic practices. If we baptize coffee from the Muslims, I think we can baptize yoga from the Hindus. I haven't had any demons in me yet from coffee. But the reason why it's important that you do those two is because they're institutional, which means you do have to submit to an authority above you. Puts the aegis of moral responsibility on them and not you, because they have to make sure that they're properly designed. Two, because they have been at it for a while and are a body of people that have to regulate these processes, they have made sure that each one of them, before they practice them, is baptized. So as each asana comes into those yogic, into those new systems, they're vetted, they're clean, they're purified, they're baptized. As part of that as well, those systems would have to have yoga instructors that have renounced all their other ways. All of these yoga instructors have said the same thing to me. I had to renounce all of my certifications. I had to renounce all of my training, right? And so they have to start all over again. Sure, use former yoga instructors because at least they're used to micro movements. Hire calisthenics teachers. But tell the bishop, fine, you want micro movement exercise in the classes? And use that because they like big words, micro movement practices in the classrooms as exercises. Here's one without any of the problems, and by the way, causes half of the back stress that yogic practices do. Here's a practice with micro movement divorced of all heresy and diabolic nature. Why aren't you using it? It's approved by bishops, it's approved by priests, it has a chaplain that works with it. It gives you all the fun stuff you want to do. I mean, I did Soul Core for a while. I got rid of it just because it was so campy. Like the crucifixion where I'm holding 2 yoga balls for a while and I'm supposed to be feeling the weight of Christ on the cross just didn't sit right with me. But not from a diabolic standpoint, it was just cheesy.
I don't know, that was
But
punishment.
you
When you did something
can
bad,
recommend the girls who've seen at Fidelis. There was a class. And it has a priest associated with it who is very well versed in all the exorcisms, and so that's what he says.
Right.
That there has to be an authority attached to it, and he has vetted the whole, like, all the classes that they're teaching.
Number one sign of diabolic activity is there's no authority. I mean, that is the original sin. Well, not the original sin, you know what I mean. That's Lucifer's sin. It's authority. So the minute you see there's a lack of authority, run the opposite direction. Then when it's asking you to expose your soul and open yourself up, there's the other sign. So, all right. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So